So I'm doing a little harvest on our slicing tomatoes, and I thought I'd show you when we harvest, how we store, and whatnot for market. We check our tomato house every day for tomatoes, and most of the time we're harvesting about every other day. And so we'll harvest beginning typically Monday, and then we'll harvest on Wednesday, and then most of the time Thursday evening into Friday for our market on Saturday. Now, because we're growing so many tomatoes and we can't let them completely vine ripen to harvest because we lose so much of our crop, we harvest them at the color crack stage, kind of like you would a tulip when it's first starting to show color. So that means in this cluster of tomatoes, I can harvest all of them, right? We have some that are pretty darn close to ripened, like this one here, and then we have this one here, which is just blushing on the bottom. And that is the perfect cluster to harvest for market. Now, you don't have to harvest the whole cluster at once. You can harvest just the ripened tomatoes and let the other ones continue to ripen on the vine a little bit longer, especially if you're harvesting later in the week to sell at market that Saturday. So this would be an example of that. In this cluster, we have 1, 2, 3 tomatoes that are ready and 1 tomato that is not. So we'll leave this green tomato on the cluster on the vine, and these 3 here we'll go ahead and harvest. So we go ahead and harvest all the tomatoes that we can for a given day. So we'll harvest both these 2. We'll leave this one down here on the cluster, and then we move them into our cooler. Now, this is a separate cooler that we use for our flowers or veggies because tomatoes and flowers, tomatoes release ethylene when they ripen, and that ruins your flower, so don't put tomatoes in a flower cooler. The veggie cooler obviously is going to be way too cold, and there are some veggies that are ethylene sensitive in there as well. And so our tomatoes actually go into a third cooler, our original cooler, and we keep that cooler at about 63 degrees, and that's going to keep them cool enough to just slowly ripen throughout the week. So when we harvest tomatoes, we snip them off the vine, and if you look at this tomato here, you can see the cluster going down, and then there's this knob here, and right below that knob is the stem that goes down into tomatoes. We cut right below this knob, and that gives us a clean cut, and it prevents a giant long stem coming out, which can puncture the tomatoes and leave little holes and imperfections at market. We harvest all our tomatoes into tulip bulb crates, and then we bring them to the cooler where they rest and sit until it's market day. And so the reason we have such a large stack of bulb crates, because bulb crates are pretty deep, that's because we put all our tomatoes into the crate in a single layer. We grow heirloom tomatoes, and heirlooms have a much more delicate skin. They don't hold up to a lot of batter and transport. So a single layer into the cooler, and we just keep them there. Don't move them until it's time to bring them to market. That way they stay as fresh and pristine as possible. And really, if we didn't harvest and store tomatoes like this, there would be a ridiculous amount of waste, because unlike many of the other vegetables that we grow, tomatoes like this, you can't really hold them in the field or on the vine. When they're ripe, you have to pick them. And so that's the strategy we employ.